The Tesla was red. Not cherry red, not candy apple cute. No! This was that polished, high-gloss crime scene red, the kind you'd see reflected in broken glass and taillights fading into darkness. The kind of red that meant something had already gone wrong. It was a Saturday in June when my parents handed Daniel the keys in the driveway, like they were knighting him. There was even a bow. My mother had tears in her eyes. My father clapped him on the back so hard you'd think Daniel had just cured cancer, instead of, say, barely scraping through his third attempt at passing Intro to Econ. Brand new, Dad said proudly. Top of the line. You earned this. I was standing 3 feet away with a paper plate of dry cake and lukewarm lemonade invisible. No one said my name. No one looked at me. Not even Daniel, who just grinned, peeled out of the driveway and took a hard right so fast the tires squealed. I swear the smell of rubber clung to my shirt like shame. I should have left right then. But I didn't, because I was raised to stay. That night, Daniel crashed the Tesla into a guardrail 25 minutes outside the city. He was fine, of course. Not a scratch on him. A miracle, the police said. The car wasn't so lucky. He'd taken it out with 2 girls in the back seat and a bottle of Don Julio between the console. And somehow it was my fault. He was looking for you, Mom snapped when I arrived at the hospital. You weren't answering your phone. He was worried. He's 24, I said deadpan. He doesn't get to play tag with a Tesla because I missed a call. She whirled on me like I'd insulted God. He wouldn't have been out there if you'd picked up. He said you were supposed to meet him, that you promised I hadn't. I hadn't promised anything. I had 3 deadlines due Monday and an 11 p.m. meeting with a New York investor I was praying would greenlight my first design pitch. But no one asked. Daniel was stretched out in the hospital bed like he was royalty fallen from grace. He looked up at me and smiled, eyes glassy. Hey sis, he said. Glad you came. I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked at my father. We need to talk. He followed me out to the corridor with that disappointed shuffle I knew too well. The one he used when I'd gotten a 94 instead of a 100. The one he used when I dared to mention I was exhausted from doing both my chores and Daniel's because he was going through something. This has to stop, I said. What does this? The constant forgiveness, the rewards for recklessness. He could have passed away tonight, Dad. And so could those girls. And you're talking about who answered the phone. He sighed like he carried the weight of a world I didn't understand. You've always been the responsible one, Amelia. That's why we expect more from you. The thing about that sentence is that it sounds like a compliment when it's really a curse. I wasn't shocked when 2 days later the insurance company called to ask if I had been driving. That was the moment I realized Daniel had given them my name. Not his. Mine. And my parents. They didn't fight it. Didn't even call to ask. It took me 48 hours to convince the agent that I'd never been within 3 feet of the wheel. I sent screenshots of my GPS location calendar entries, even a video call log from the moment the crash happened. No apology ever came, but the damage had already begun. My job, the one I was holding onto by my cuticles, asked me to take unpaid leave to sort through the drama. My investor ghosted me. My landlord, who was on friendly terms with my father, mentioned in passing that I seemed troubled lately. I don't remember the moment I started shaking. I just remember that I couldn't stop, so I left. I packed up my laptop, my architectural models, the only ceramic mug that ever felt like mine, and I left the apartment I'd spent 6 years building into something quiet and kind. I stayed in a motel on the outskirts of town, the kind with doors that open into the parking lot, not a hallway. For 3 days, I didn't speak to anyone, not a soul. I stared at the motel wallpaper. I drank coffee from the lobby machine. I sat with the silence until it stopped screaming. On the 4th day, Daniel texted me. They're upset you disappeared. You should at least call Mom. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and found the listing Abandoned Community Center, condemned off-market negotiable, contact for inquiry. It was in East Haven, 15 blocks from where Daniel's Tesla had skidded into a rail. It was where I almost passed away once. But that's not this part of the story. Not yet. The listing was a mess. The photos were barely legible. The building had water damage rat droppings and graffiti that hadn't been touched in years. But I couldn't stop staring at it. There was something about the brokenness that felt honest. At noon, I called the number. A man answered. I said I wanted to buy it, no inspections, no contingencies. He asked if I was joking. I wired the down payment before the end of the call, and just like that, I was out. Out of the house I grew up in, the expectations that clung like mildew, the role of good daughter I never agreed to audition for. Out of the silent role I'd been playing for 31 years. I didn't call mom. I didn't tell Daniel. I didn't even check in with my therapist. I just drove to East Haven in a borrowed truck, stood in front of the crumbling brick shell, and whispered, "Mine." No one heard me. But for once, that felt like power, not absence. The city wouldn't issue permits for months. The structure was labeled unsafe. I wasn't allowed to even enter without signing 3 waivers and wearing a helmet I borrowed from a retired firefighter named Dave, who took pity on me when he saw me trying to scrape rust off the window bars. "Ambitious project," he muttered. I nodded. "It's personal." He didn't ask. Good man. I spent that summer with dust in my lungs and hope in my fingernails. I sketched blueprints at midnight and fought City Hall at dawn. I learned how to bribe rats with peanut butter and how to navigate bureaucratic apathy with fake smiles and hard numbers. I stopped wearing perfume. I stopped waiting for calls. And slowly, piece by piece, that building stopped crumbling. So did I. At night, I sat in what used to be a storage room, now cleared out and furnished with a single folding chair. I kept my ceramic mug with me, chipped and stained and perfect. It reminded me of something important. Once broken didn't mean broken forever. Once Mom asked me why I still kept it. "You could just buy a new one," she said. But the thing is, I did buy it. I chose it. I made coffee in it every morning and washed it by hand because the dishwasher never understood its shape. I held it through so many breakdowns and late-night deadlines, I swear it knew my pulse. Just like I knew that no matter how much I rebuilt, they'd still see Daniel as the phoenix, even though he never rose from anything. I was the ashes, but I wasn't done burning yet. My name is Amelia Tron. I'm 31 years old. I design public spaces, parks, schools, libraries that feel like hugs. I live a quiet life in a loud world in a renovated warehouse above the school I built with my own hands. There's no plaque with my name on it. That was on purpose. I used to think I was a bad daughter, a flawed sister. That maybe if I were more patient, less angry, more invisible, or more useful, or both, I'd be loved the way I wanted. Not for what I fixed, but for who I was, when nothing needed fixing. But love in my house had rules, and they only ever changed for my brother. Daniel was born loud. First by nature, big lungs, strong cry. Then by entitlement. He was the kind of boy who fell upstairs and got trophies for it. The kind who never finished his homework, but was always offered a second chance. He had charm the way lightning has brilliance, bright, dangerous, and without warning. I used to idolize him. When we were kids, he taught me how to climb the backyard oak tree, then pushed me off the second branch when I got higher than him. I broke my wrist. He got grounded for an hour. They said boys will be boys. I heard pain is proof you mattered for a moment. By the time I was 10, I'd stopped telling on him. By 12, I'd stopped reacting at all. It didn't matter if he took my things, hit my shoulder too hard, made jokes at my expense. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I stayed silent, I was cold. If I fought back, I was asking for it. So I learned to apologize first, preemptively. Like a prayer I didn't believe in, but said anyway. I became the easy one. Straight A's violin recital, science fair, wins. No noise, no fuss. I filled the fridge with Post-its reminding everyone of dentist appointments, bill dues dates, prescription refills. I did Daniel's chores. I lied for him when he forgot to feed the dog. I lied for him again when he broke the neighbor's window with a baseball and blamed a kid on a bike. My reward, silence. Not even the peaceful kind, just the absence of acknowledgement. No thank you, no, we're proud. No sense that any of it mattered unless it helped them protect him. They said I was so mature. I was 13. When I was 17, something happened that changed the way I looked at everything. Daniel had just gotten his license. He begged to borrow my car, the one I saved 2 years of babysitting and tutoring for. A beat-up silver Honda Civic with a missing hubcap and a cassette player that worked when it wanted to. I said no. He waited until I was asleep, took my spare key from under the planter, and drove it anyway. He came back at 3 a.m. with the passenger side completely caved in. He told them I gave him permission. I woke up to my dad yelling at me from the hallway. I didn't understand at first. My room smelled like lavender and sleep. My SAT prep book was still open on the desk. "He could have been killed," Dad roared. I didn't. I started, but Mom was already shaking her head. "You knew he wasn't ready. You're older. You're supposed to set an example." Daniel stood behind them, head down, shoulders slumped like a statue carved from guilt. I remember thinking he might finally confess. He didn't. Not then, not ever. I was grounded for a month, lost the car, missed the regional science competition I'd been prepping for all year. When I cried, my mother handed me tissues like she was being generous. "You brought this on yourself," she whispered. That night, Daniel left a Kit Kat bar on my bed with a note. "Sorry, I'll make it up to you." He never did. But I kept the note for 5 years. That's what glass children do. That's the term I found on a message board during my first year of college when I was trying to understand why I flinched at loud voices and felt more comfortable with professors than peers. Glass child, the child who's seen through because their sibling takes up all the oxygen in the room, usually due to illness, addiction, or behavioral issues. They learn to shatter quietly. I cried for 2 hours after reading that. Not because I was broken, but because there was a word for it. College was supposed to be freedom, and for a while it was. I picked architecture because I loved the idea of building things that wouldn't fall apart, spaces that made people feel safe without knowing why. But even then, I carried their voices with me. "You're only getting through because of our sacrifices. Don't forget where you came from. Daniel needs more help, that's all. You don't know what it's like to be him." That last one always stung. As if being invisible was easier than being loud. As if Daniel's chaos gave him permission to be cared for, while my stillness meant I was fine. He dropped out of college 3 times. I sent money every semester. He crashed 2 more cars. I drove him to court. He overdosed once in my apartment because he didn't want Mom and Dad to see him like that. I sat beside him while the EMTs pumped his stomach. He cried and called me his guardian angel. Then he stole my rent money the next morning and vanished. Still, I said nothing. Why? Because if I burned the bridge, I'd be alone. And if I was alone, then maybe they were right, that I was cold, heartless, unloving, that I didn't understand family. But the truth, I understood it too well. Family was a transaction, love a currency, and I was always in debt. That brings me to the night I nearly passed away. It wasn't dramatic. No fire, no blood. Just cold, sharp metal, and my own breath fogging up the cracked window of the Civic. Yes, that Civic, which I'd bought back at an auction years later. I told people it was nostalgia. Really, it was a lifeline. Daniel had called slurring, asking me to pick him up from a party. I said no, I was tired. I had work. I was done. He cried, said no one else would come. I broke. It was raining. The kind of rain that turns the road into a memory you can't quite hold on to. He wasn't there when I arrived, just a voicemail saying, "Forget it, I'm walking." I found him 3 blocks away, standing in the middle of the street, arms out, drunk and screaming at the sky. When I pulled over to yell at him, he threw his bottle. Not at me, just threw it. It shattered near my tire. Startled, I jerked the wheel. I hit the guardrail. Airbag, darkness, silence. My legs were pinned. Smoke coiled out of the hood. I remember thinking, so this is what it takes for them to notice. I woke up in the hospital. Daniel was crying beside my bed. So was Mom. Dad stood in the corner with a bouquet he never handed me. No one asked what happened. They assumed I'd lost control. Daniel didn't correct them. Later, a nurse told me he'd told the police I was speeding. Said I'd refused to let him drive because I liked control. They dropped the case. I left the hospital with a scar on my thigh and a new understanding, if I passed away, they'd still find a way to make it my fault. That's when I stopped being a daughter. I became a ghost with a vision, one that no one saw coming, one that would outlive their denial. The building at 427 East Haven Street had no name. The city registry listed it as non-viable. The real estate agent, a jittery man who clearly wanted me to back out before the ink dried, called it haunted by failure. I called it mine. I wore work gloves more than I wore makeup that year, traded PowerPoints for power drills. My architectural degree had taught me about tension loads and zoning codes, but not about how to deal with corroded pipes that bled like open wounds, or how it felt to sweep dead pigeons from what would become a library for first-generation kids. I had $86,111.22 in my savings account, most of it intended for a mortgage I never got to use. The rest was severance from the boutique firm that quietly cut me loose after the insurance drama with Daniel. They'd called it a mutual separation. I called it what it was: abandonment dressed in polite HR speak. The first 3 months in East Haven were hell. My shoes rotted out from walking through waterlogged floors. The first contractor I hired ghosted me after I refused to sweeten the deal under the table. The local council denied my use permit 3 times before I realized you had to speak their language, not emotional appeals, but spreadsheets and scaled-down models they could brag about to their re-election committees. I learned fast. Pain had taught me fluency in silence. Anger taught me fluency in precision. By month 4, I was no longer asking for permission. I was filing notices referencing loopholes, quoting ordinance clauses like scripture. The building began to breathe again. The community didn't know what to make of me at first. I was this woman with clipped tones and scraped knuckles, drawing chalk outlines on cracked sidewalks and muttering to herself in the dusk. Kids on bikes laughed at me. An older woman named Gloria from the bodega across the street started leaving free coffee on my workbench. "You're either crazy or brave," she said. "Maybe both," I replied, and she laughed like we were already friends. I didn't intend to build a school, not at first. It started with wanting to create a shelter, then a learning center. Then I thought, why not a place that did both? Space for girls who'd been told they were too loud, too bossy, too smart. A space I would have bled to have at 15. I called it the Mosaic Room. Because even broken things could be made beautiful. Every inch of it carried a story. The tiles in the hallway were salvaged from a demolished church. The desks were mismatched, donated by 4 different districts who'd written them off as surplus. The library had only 1 full shelf, at first stocked with books I rescued from my old college, and a few that Gloria slipped in quietly. Zora Neale Hurston, Audre Lorde, Bell Hooks. One morning, I found a small blue mug on the front steps. It had a chipped rim and a post-it stuck to the inside, for your coffee. Or your anger. No signature. But I knew. It was from my therapist. I hadn't seen her in 6 months. Somehow, she knew I was building something. I kept the mug. On the 1-year anniversary of purchasing the building, I stood on the newly finished rooftop garden and cried. Not loud, not pretty. It was one of those slow, private unravelings, the kind you do when no one's watching, and the moon feels like a witness. I wasn't supposed to make it this far. I had no grants, no family support, no Instagram campaign, just grit, shame, and a quiet refusal to disappear. The Mosaic Room opened its doors to 12 girls that September. Some were daughters of undocumented parents. Some had been expelled from traditional schools for attitude problems. One had a court case pending. They walked through the door and looked around like the space might vanish if they breathed too hard. I told them what no one told me. You don't have to be small here. You don't have to earn your right to exist. That first day, one of them asked Miss Tran, "Is this a real school?" I nodded. "It's as real as you are." They smiled. I knew that smile. I'd worn it too fragile, disbelieving hungry. We had no gym, no cafeteria, no certified staff, except me and a retired social worker who offered to teach writing in exchange for bus fare and soup. But we had warmth, and structure, and freedom. Word spread. By winter, we had 30 applications and a waiting list. That was when the newspaper showed up. The reporter was young and nervous and asked if I wanted to be featured in the city's Women of Impact series. I hesitated. Exposure meant risk. It meant Daniel might see, my parents might call. But it also meant the girls would be seen. The project could get donors. I said yes. The piece came out with a photo of me in front of the cracked red doors, holding a blueprint, and the chipped blue mug. The headline read, "From Wreckage to Wonder One Woman's School of Second Chances." The calls started within days. My old firm offered a consulting contract. Politicians sent flowers. One offered to nominate me for a civic leadership award. And then, inevitably, my mother showed up. She didn't call first, just stood on the sidewalk like a ghost clutching a reusable grocery bag full of what turned out to be vitamin supplements and a scarf. "You looked thin in the article," she said. I stared at her, unsure whether to laugh or cry. Instead, I said, "What do you want?" She hesitated. "To see it." I let her in. She walked the halls in silence, touching the walls like they might crumble beneath her fingers. When we reached the library, she sat in the corner chair and said, "You were always like this." "Like what intense?" "Too much." I waited. Then she added, "But maybe too much is what the world needed." That was the closest thing to an apology I would ever get. I didn't say thank you. I didn't offer her a tour. I just handed her the visitor sign-in sheet and pointed to the pen. Before she left, she said, "Daniel saw the article. He wanted me to ask if you'd come to dinner next week. He wants to talk." I said no. She nodded like she expected it. But later that night, I looked at the old note he'd left on my bed years ago. "Sorry. I'll make it up to you." And for reasons I couldn't explain, I didn't rip it up. I just put it back in the drawer. Because something was building inside me. Not forgiveness, not revenge, strategy. I had leverage now, and I wasn't going to waste it. Daniel picked the restaurant. Some trendy fusion place downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and napkins folded like origami. The kind of place you go to be seen. The kind of place where everything costs 3 times more than it should and somehow still feels cheap. He hugged me like we were close. "Amelia," he said, like my name was a surprise in his mouth. I stood still. Our parents had already arrived. Mom in her pearls, Dad in his stiff blazer. I wondered if they'd practiced the performance of reconciliation. The effortlessness of pretending nothing ever happened. Daniel ordered a bottle of wine before I even sat down, so he began smiling like a man who thought charm could erase history. I read the article. "Amazing stuff, really. Thanks. You always had a thing for the underdog," Dad added, trying for warm. "No," I said, unfolding my napkin. "I just know what it's like to be one." A flicker crossed his face, then vanished. They didn't know. Not yet. The waiter came. Orders were placed. Lobster bisque, sea bass, truffle fries. I didn't touch mine. My stomach was a knotted rope. I kept my hand around the ceramic handle of my mug. I'd brought it with me, tucked inside my bag. It was symbolic now. A relic. Daniel leaned back in his chair, confident. "So listen," he said, his voice going soft. "I've been reflecting. I know things between us haven't always been great, but I'm trying to grow. You know, Mom and Dad said you might be open to helping me get started with something, like maybe a program at your school, a teaching thing, just to get my feet under me." I looked at him, then at our parents, and I realized they still didn't see me. Not really. They saw a resource, a utility, a ladder. And Daniel. He saw an out. "I'm not hiring you," I said quietly. His smile faltered. "It doesn't have to be a big role. You're not setting foot in my school." Silence. Mom's voice turned sharp. "Amelia, don't be cruel. He's reaching out. He's trying." "No," I said again, this time louder. "He's performing, and you're applauding. But I'm done pretending." Dad's jaw tightened. "You don't have to be spiteful." I reached into my bag, pulled out a small flash drive, set it on the table. "This," I said, "is the dashcam footage from the night Daniel crashed the Tesla." Daniel froze. Mom blinked. "Key?" "There was a neighbor's nest." "Cam too," I added. "It caught him taking the car drunk. No one else in it. No phone call. No looking for me. Just him driving wasted." Dad paled. "I sent copies to the insurance company," I said. 3 weeks ago." Daniel looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. Amelia, come on." I also sent them the police report from the time he left me in the Civic." I continued. "And the tickets, and the voicemail." My voice didn't shake. It was ice. The waiter approached, sensing tension. "Everything okay here?" "We're good," I said calmly. "Just resolving old debts." When he left, I opened my phone and played the voicemail. Daniel's voice slurred and cruel, yelling, something about how I never help and always act better. Then the crash of glass. Then silence. My parents stared like they'd just been unplugged from a delusion. I leaned forward. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stop using me to clean up your messes. You're going to stop pretending I'm the villain because I don't play along. And you," I turned to Daniel, "you're going to keep my name out of your mouth forever." His voice cracked. "I made mistakes. I get that, but no. You didn't just make mistakes. You made choices. And you never faced them. That ends now." Mom wiped at her eyes. "This doesn't have to be a fight." I laughed, sharp and tired. "This has always been a fight. You just never noticed because I didn't hit back." Then I pulled out the final piece. An envelope. "The will," I said. "Grandma's." They blinked. "She left the downtown property to me. Not Daniel. Not both of us. Me. Sole heir." I didn't mention it before because I didn't think it mattered. But now it does. Daniel's face turned red. "She said she was giving that to both of us." "She changed her mind. Months before she passed away. I was the only one who visited her when she got sick." "You were at a poker tournament." Mom's lips parted like she might protest, but she didn't. She knew. I stood. The mug clinked softly as I tucked it back into my bag. "I'm not here for revenge," I said. "I'm here to reclaim my name. And if you still can't respect that, then this is goodbye." I walked out of the restaurant without looking back. Outside, the city was buzzing. Normal. Oblivious. I stood on the curb, breathing like it was the first time in years I'd remembered how. Back at the school that night, I found a post-it stuck to my office door. It was from one of the girls. It said, "Thank you for building a place where I matter." I sat down, held the note in one hand, and cried. Not from grief, but from release. The ribbon was blue, tied loosely across the iron gates that once held nothing but rust and silence. Now they shimmered beneath the late morning sun, the final touch on what I'd built, not just from concrete and steel, but from grit, from memory, from the parts of me that never made it into family photographs. The mosaic room was no longer just a shelter or a learning space. It was officially a registered charter school, accredited, funded, respected. The name was engraved on a sandstone slab we embedded into the courtyard wall, surrounded by hand-painted tiles the girls made themselves. Each one told a story. One showed a mother holding a briefcase. Another, a volcano made of books. One simply read, "I exist." That morning, I stood behind the podium, facing the crowd, teachers, reporters, parents, and the 37 girls who now called this place their second home. I didn't invite my family. They came anyway. I saw them in the second row, sitting stiffly next to Gloria, who was now officially our board's community liaison. Daniel wore a collared shirt I didn't recognize, and sunglasses like he was hiding from something. My parents looked smaller than I remembered. When the local councilwoman introduced me as a visionary leader in equitable education, I smiled politely, stepped forward, and cleared my throat. "I was never supposed to be here," I began. That wasn't a metaphor. It was just true. I was supposed to be grateful, quiet, useful. I was supposed to make other people shine and clean up what was left behind. The audience hushed, but this building wasn't built from supposed to. It was built from survival, from rage, from the stubborn belief that broken things are worth saving. I looked at the girls in the front row, heads tilted, eyes wide, some already scribbling in the notebooks we gave them on the first day. I made this place for them, but also for the girl I used to be, the one who thought silence was strength and being invisible was safety. A tear slipped from someone's cheek, maybe mine. Later, after the ceremony, the girls ran toward the garden where we had fresh juice and cupcakes with edible flowers. The courtyard buzzed with laughter and music, but I stayed near the front gate, watching from a distance. That's when Mom approached. She walked slowly like someone unsure of their welcome. She had something in her hand, a small square object wrapped in faded wrapping paper I hadn't seen in years. "I found this when we were cleaning the attic," she said. "Thought maybe it belonged here." I opened it. It was a photo of me at age 9, holding a Lego tower taller than my torso. My face was flushed with pride. No one else was in the frame. I remembered that day. Daniel had broken the tower minutes later and blamed the cat. I cried, and my parents told me to rebuild it like a good sport. I'd forgotten the photo even existed. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "For all of it. For what we didn't see. For what we put on you." I didn't speak. Not because I was angry, but because I needed to feel the silence this time, not as punishment, but as power. Behind her, Dad stood awkwardly, his hands jammed in his pockets. He looked at the school building, then at me. "You did good, Amelia." I nodded. Daniel didn't approach. He lingered near the edge of the garden, kicking the gravel with the tip of his shoe. When he finally looked up, we locked eyes. He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. It wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. I could live with that. 3 months later, I put the final tile into the memory wall. Each student had one. Teachers, too. There was a blank one saved for anyone who needed it. I placed mine last, not in the center, but off to the side, where it might be found by someone searching for the edges. I painted it myself, a blueprint, a heart, and a mug. The same chipped blue mug sat in my office, still holding pens and paper clips. It never broke, no matter how many times I dropped it. Neither did I. I still get calls from investors now. Offers to expand. Franchise. Scale. I say no because this isn't a business. It's a legacy. The building on Haven Street, where I was nearly erased, is now where dozens of girls learn to write themselves into history. Not one of them has ever heard the name Daniel. Not one of them needs to. When the sun hits the mosaic wall just right, the whole courtyard glows. Not in gold, not in silver, but in red, deep, defiant crime scene red. The color of a Tesla that crashed, and a life that didn't. The color of a woman no one could see until she built something too beautiful to ignore. Sometimes I walk through the halls late at night when the school is silent, and the air still smells faintly of chalk and lavender floor cleaner. I press my hand against the walls and feel their warmth. They hold so much now: laughter, ambition, grief, resistance. No one erased me here. Not the way I was erased in my own home. Not the way I learned to erase myself. I used to wonder if my life would always be reactionary, shaped around what others did to me, what they failed to do for me. But building this school, this community, taught me something quieter. Something harder. Control doesn't come from vengeance. It comes from choosing what to carry forward and what to leave behind. The rage still lives inside me. I don't deny it anymore, but now it has a job. It fuels things. It lays foundations. It makes sure no girl who walks through these doors believes she has to shrink to survive. Sometimes I think about the necklace I lost when I was 15. My grandmother gave it to me, and I cried when I couldn't find it. I thought it was gone forever. Last week, a student found it while planting basil in the courtyard. It had been buried in the dirt. Still intact. A little tarnished. But there. I wear it now. Not because it completes me, but because it reminds me that some things can be lost and still come back stronger. Even me. Especially me. And this time no one's looking through me. They're looking to me. Finally. And I let them. Quietly, but completely.